probably heard a lot about heart health, and you know what to do to keep your heart in tip-top shape. Exercise, eat well, don't smoke. Well, what about brain health? Here's an easy tip. Heart health is brain health. More and more research is showing that there is a lot you can do to keep your brain healthy, no matter how young or old you are, whether you live with disease or not. And the most powerful tools for brain health are part of your everyday, what we call your lifestyle, how much you move, what you eat, how well you manage your stress. In this video, we're going to talk about brain health, lifestyle, and everything in between, and take your top questions. I'm talking with the brain docs, Dean and Ayesha Sherzai. Dr. Dean Sherzai is a behavioral neurologist and neuroscientist, and Dr. Ayesha Sherzai is a vascular neurologist and a research scientist. They are best-selling authors and currently leading a large community-based brain health initiative. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us, Rachel.
So, first let me ask, you call yourself the brain docs. Why is that?
I think it's easy for people to remember that, we represent brain health. We want the word brain to come up in everybody's day-to-day language because it's such an important topic.
This is a vital organ that we've avoided for throughout history because we didn't know much about it. But there's a lot that we know now, and it's important to kind of get to know that concept.
So you mentioned the word brain health, and this is a term I personally throw around a lot. So we have a question from our community member on this topic. It comes from Dave Harris and his wife, Kim, who live in Missouri. Dave was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2022.
My question is, what does brain health actually mean? And am I able to boost my brain health through lifestyle strategy changes like change in diet or exercise if I'm older and living with a disease like Parkinson's?
Brain health is, as you said, heart health, but also it's understanding that the brain is the most active organ in the body. We're talking about 87 billion neurons, 1 quadrillion potential connections, a brain that never sleeps. In fact, the very function of sleep is mostly for the brain to recover. So brain health is about maintaining this incredibly powerful organ in an environment that's constantly changing. There's no static state in the brain, and we need to be aware of it. Everything that goes into that brain, into that environment of that brain that can make it worse, and things that can make it better.
And brain health isn't just the absence of disease or just keeping our memory. I think a lot of times we think about brain health being, I still have, my memory and my thinking. Of course, that's part of it, but it's much broader than that, isn't it?
Oh, definitely it is broader. I mean, the brain being the most active organ in the body, at any moment it consumes 25% of your body's energy. It's only about, 2% of your body's weight, but consumes up to 25% of your body's energy. So that is a great reflection of how active it is. And if we do the right things, it will continuously work at its peak. And when we say your brain functions well, it's basically you functioning well as a human being. You think better, you are faster, you process information better, you have greater relationships with other human beings, you feel good. And if you actually compromise some of your lifestyle factors, like for example, if you compromise your sleep, or if you don't move around, or if you don't eat well, definitely there's going to be a cumulative damage later on in life. But even at that very moment, you're actually going to feel the consequences. And so this amazing organ gets impacted by everything we do every single moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of that is that all these things are cumulative, both on the positive direction and in the negative direction. In the negative direction, we're aware that when you don't sleep, you affect memory, attention, focus, all of these things. And if you don't eat well, that affects other systems as well. And if you don't exercise, the blood flow, as far as cardiovascular health, everything else will be affected. But the positive side of that is, if you start doing those things, the cumulative effect of those are not just additive, they are multiplicative, because when you exercise, your sleep gets better, the blood flow gets better. When you eat better, same thing, it encompasses everything else. So I want people to focus on the positive aspect of this.
And so we'll get into that. But before we do, I want to talk about aging. And you mentioned this cumulative, things adding over time. And aging is a big risk factor for disease like Parkinson's, like Alzheimer's. And of course, we're all getting older. And our brains change just like our bodies change. And for a lot of people, there's a question of what's normal with aging and what might be disease. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
There was a time that when we answered that, we said that there are some changes that happen to everybody as we get older. And there probably is, as it stands now, as it stands for majority of people who live a particular lifestyle now. And that's the cumulative trauma. I call it trauma. The cumulative trauma of poor input, food, stress, things of that nature. The cumulative trauma of sedentary life, because when you don't move, it's not just movement, it's blood flow, it's lymphatic flow. So we don't want to focus on aging because we really think that the effect of cumulative negative is more important than the age process itself. And the positive side of that is the cumulative effect of positive is also going to be great as we get older. So instead of mapping it out the way it is, which is when you get older, it's yes, your memory might get a little worse, your attention is going to get worse, but that really the science with that is just particular population, and it's not for the broader population. So I want this language to flip from aging being a negative thing and focusing on the cumulative effect of negative forces and the cumulative effect of positive forces. That's a better way. Otherwise, we're going to focus on aging as a negative.
As a matter of fact, Dean and I believe, and this has been like the message that we want to propagate, is that the brain is the only organ that can get better as we age. There's always this thought that you lose your memories or you get slower or you don't function as you did when you were younger. But we actually have a lot of data from successful agers and successful cognitive agers showing that if you address the lifestyle risk factors, you have more experiences, you have more stories, you have more creativity, you have more ideas. And when you put all of that together, that's a beautiful brain, and it can actually stay beautiful and healthy for the rest of your life.
And I want to emphasize something you said, which is that our brain can change in positive ways throughout our life. I think we long thought that kind of what's done is done in the brain and you can't change things, but you're here to tell us that's not true.
Remember, 87 billion neurons. Let's do the math. Each of them can make a couple of connections or as many as 30,000 connections. That's the power, and that's happening constantly all the time. What we do, what we say, what we think, how we feel, how we interact. Those are the things that make the connections. That's powerful.
I love what you said too about it not just being our activities, which we'll talk more in depth about, but also our attitude and our mindset, which we often don't talk about as much.
Definitely, yes, because I think it's a two-way process. It's a beautiful symbiotic relationship between your activities and the things that you choose every single day and how it manifests in your mood. And if there is an imbalance in one part, say, for example, if you were not doing, let's say, from some of the studies that show that when people exercise, they have better mood. We have these chemicals called endorphins that are created when we exercise. We have growth hormones called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that actually gets produced when you exercise. That creates more connections. That actually creates this feeling of elation. If we're not moving, if we're sitting on our desk all day long, and if we're not exposing ourselves to some sunlight or some nature, you kind of have this like really dreary, this down feeling, and you're not moving. So it kind of affects your mood. The other way around, if somebody has some mood problems, or if they have anxiety, or if they have some psychological issues that are not addressed, that can impact their lifestyle as well. So it's bi-directional, and it's very important for people to determine what they need to do for better brain health.
So our thoughts impact our brain and how our brain works and what we then do or don't do. And lifestyle, as we've touched on, is everything we're kind of doing or not doing to take care of our brain and to take care of our bodies. And those are some of the most powerful tools to help us care for our brain, whether we're just getting older or whether we're living with disease, helping us live as well as possible. So tell us a little bit more about lifestyle. Particularly, when you talk with people about taking care of their brains, what kinds of activities are you telling them to think about?
We, created this acronym that's easy for our patients to remember. We call it the NEURO factors, or the NEURO plan or lifestyle factors. And it stands for nutrition, exercise, unwind, which is stress management. R is for restorative sleep, the deep kind of sleep that allows the brain to cleanse itself. And O is for optimizing cognitive activity. And when you look at each and every factor, backed by decades of data and science, and we were actually looking at some factors as well in the community, we know that when people adhere to these, and it's not an all or none phenomenon, every small little step of change towards these factors makes a huge difference. Let's start with nutrition. We know that what you eat on a regular basis, the kind of dietary patterns that you adhere to, matters. It impacts your brain health, whether it's slowing down or preventing Alzheimer's disease or dementias, whether it's Parkinson's disease, whether it's stroke or vascular dementia. We know that a diet that consists of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes and nuts and seeds, that is plant predominant and it's lower in ultra-processed foods and saturated fats, is very healthy for brain health. As far as exercise is concerned, movement is really important, and we have so much data supporting that. As far as stress management is concerned, we kind of touched on it, of how important it is to address mental health issues as far as anxiety and stress is concerned. And as it happens, you is in the middle of neuro, and it's such an important factor because it impacts everything. It impacts the foods that we choose. It impacts the kind of companies that we keep. It impacts what activities we choose to keep our minds active. And then sleep is a whole world on its own. We know that the different stages of sleep serve a very important purpose for the brain to cleanse itself and to also consolidate memory. So all of this information that we accumulate during the day gets stored in the right file, folder, and cabinet when we go through the deep stages of sleep. And anything that disrupts sleep can actually disrupt our memories and our cognition as well. And then the last one is optimization of cognitive activity, which means keeping your mind active with activities that are meaningful to you, that give you purpose, whether it's painting, whether it's interviewing neurologists, whether it's being a filming crew and being a specialist in any particular form of art. All of these actually, they're very important for brain health, and they create all those necessary connections for the brain to grow and thrive.
So crosswords can be good if that's meaningful to you, but it's not just about a crossword puzzle. It's about finding activities that are exercising your brain that mean something to you.
We did a meta-analysis in 2018 and showed that even simple games improved brain health. But complex behaviors, real-life behaviors, matter more because they are interconnected with other things, aren't they? Remember, the brain is about interconnectedness. It's not just about those axons and dendrites sprouting. It's about them connecting to other ideas, other islands of thought. And so when you're doing something like learning a musical instrument, that's the entirety of the brain being activated, and then of course the emotional component because you like it. So doing real-life activities that are, around your proclivities, but also you like, and then here's the rub, the important part. You have to push yourself. The same way that walking is good, but brisk walk is better. Learning a song with 4 chords, and if that's all you're playing, first of all, you're gonna get kicked out of your house. But if you're learning 4 chords, then learn 5 chords. Push yourself. This combination makes the neurons connect and connect across different islands of thought. This concept of idea density is incredibly protective and important. So build your idea density.
A lot of these can seem deceptively simple, right? Eat better, go out and get sunlight, move. These are all the things our mom was telling us when we were little, right? So I think for a lot of people, it can seem like, can these really have an impact? Are they just as good as the shiny new treatment out on the market?
They do. And I think it's these simple activities and simple things that we do every single day on a regular basis that make the biggest impact. Unfortunately, when people think of brain diseases, we start thinking about our brain when we are experiencing the disease, whether it's in ourselves or in a loved one. And I think it's really important for us to kind of change that narrative and start thinking about our brain health from childhood. When you look at scientific evidence and evidence-based medicine, it's these lifestyle factors that actually come to surface and are the most important things. So yes, and I think adhering to them and making them a part of our life and creating really solid habits around them is key. That's what takes a little bit of time, but it's not difficult.
And that's the thing about it. Even if we know that we're supposed to do this, it's not necessarily easy to do. Our lives might not be set up in a way to exercise, or we may live with disease that's progressing. So it's more about how do we actually bring those into our lives. And we have a question along those lines from Lisa Wolonek, who's a Nebraska native who was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's in 2014.
The challenge for me is the fact that I get fatigued so easily. And then I want to kind of beat myself up, and here come the waves of depression because I can't go out and do the same things that I used to do. And so I think I need motivation to know, what does exercise truly do to my brain? And does it help me long term? I know I'm going to feel better if I work out. Everybody feels better when they work out. But for Parkinson's patients, is it a bigger impact on the brain than perhaps we realize?
First of all, she's right. We'll leave the mood component apart from whether it's reducing anxiety and depression and things of that nature. But when it comes to the very function of the brain and physiology of the brain, there's really not much that's more powerful than exercise. We both have degrees in nutrition, but we're kind of now saying that it's as powerful, if not more powerful, than even nutrition. We can't do without one or the other. We have to do all of it. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain powerfully. Remember, this little 3-pound organ, 2% of body's weight, consumes a lot of blood. And it needs a lot of blood that's oxygenated. And what gets it to it? Exercise does. It also increases this hormone called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. If there is a growth factor out there that grows the connections between neurons, it's BDNF. It's mental activity and exercise that are the things that create the connections. And this is true for Parkinson's, and the studies have shown this. And this is true for Alzheimer's, or basically for brain health. There's literally nothing that helps grow connections between neurons better than exercise.
Sometimes we make exercise seem such a monstrous activity to take part in that it becomes really difficult and we get scared and we kind of push it back. But it doesn't have to be a dedicated time. Every small little thing you can do, move around, stand up if you're sitting for more than an hour, matters. So you can actually basically just spread it throughout the day. Don't make a thing out of it. Even moving around, engaging in anything that makes you stand up, bend down, do some squats, and just being conscious and being aware of your movement throughout the day makes a huge difference. So, anything that Lisa can do during her daytime is more than enough.
And I love that concept so much. And it's because the limitations that we hear is time and space. I said, do you watch a show? Yes. So while you're watching the show, stand up and do some squats or walk in place. That's it. Space and time taken care of. And that's important for people to realize that it doesn't have to be a very fancy program.
Yeah, exercise is absolutely critical for all of us, but especially when you're living with something like Parkinson's. And I've heard this concept that you're talking about building exercise in throughout your day described as exercise snacks. And I always say, who doesn't love a snack, right? So if you can get in 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there and 10 minutes later, you've got your 30 minutes in. Absolutely. But it's just about figuring out how it works in your life. And specifically to Lisa's question on Parkinson's, of course, we know that exercise helps with all of the symptoms. It helps your medication work better. And we even see from research that it may slow progression of disease. But sometimes that's just not enough either. It's not enough to get you out on the rainy day or when you're feeling fatigued. And so I always remind people to bring it back to something tangible and meaningful to you. Do you want to be able to walk hand in hand with your spouse without feeling off balance? Then that's your goal. And outside of exercise, we talked about a lot of the other lifestyle tools. You mentioned sleep and stress reduction. This is good news and bad news, I think, because there's so much we can do, but then it can feel overwhelming and like a full-time job. How do we get in all of these lifestyle factors? So we have a question from Susan Levy, who lives in Washington, about this. Susan's mother lived with Parkinson's. Susan doesn't have the disease, but she does have a genetic change that increases her risk for Parkinson's. So here's her question.
I know that lifestyle habits are really important for brain health. If you had to choose between 3 and 5 habits, what would you say are the most important? And if you could only choose one to start with, which one would you suggest?
Beautiful question. And this speaks to making sure that you take on habits in a way that are sustainable and stackable. And of those, the hardest one is sleep. And the easiest one is exercise. We'll use that term, the most motivating one is exercise. And the one that you immediately feel an effect with is exercise. So I would say exercise is first. And again, I say that it doesn't have to be a complex exercise regimen. If you do a 25-minute walk in the morning, outdoors, or in the room if you have no space, it is incredibly powerful. And then slowly increase the pace so that you feel it more and more and more. And add to that a little bit of strength training, especially leg exercises. Leg strength seems to have a lot of correlation with long-term health. We know this from fall studies and as people age, but also as far as brain health is concerned.
I usually joke around. I have 3 tips for my lovely, female patients and community members. I was like, do squats, stay away from drama, and eat your greens, in that order.
The other 2, I would say nutrition and greens. If there is a superfood, and we don't believe in superfoods, it's greens. Whatever dietary pattern you have, adding greens seems to be incredibly positive. Studies have shown that people who have added 1 or 2 extra servings of greens per day have significantly improved their brain health. Significantly. We're talking about years.
And greens can be kale, spinach, collard greens, anything like that.
Absolutely. Green leafy vegetables. Yes.
And I love what you say about add or increase, right? It's about what we can add to our lives, even if it's exercise or more sunlight when we're out taking a walk, focusing on that framing around the positive and what we're adding to our lives versus what we might have to think about taking away.
I think that's critical. I think the first 10 habits that you slowly add over time should be adding. Don't take away anything. Because once you have 10 positive steps, then you're not turning back. Now you're going to take away the negatives. But don't even start there. Add positives. And a third factor is very important, both as far as quality of life and as far as how it affects your brain. It's mental activity. Keep engaged, keep connected, both with society, with community, with others. That's mental activity. When you're talking to somebody here, I have to be aware. I have to read the person. I have to read the concept. I have to analyze the concept. I have to formulate an answer. Then I have to come up with multiple answers and then give one. That is mental exercise. When you're actually socializing and leading a group, volunteering, that's mental activity. I want people to recognize that a diagnosis or even a risk is something that should motivate you to move you towards doing the thing that grows your brain. And between exercise and mental activity, there's nothing out there that would be sold for a while that's going to grow the connection between your brain as powerfully. So be engaged. If you're doing one activity, find 2, 3 other activities. Nowadays, there are courses online. That very course that you wanted, that esoteric philosophy of history of New Guinea, do it. Take that class. It's going to help grow the brain. And you will learn about New Guinea. So activities like that are not just little cute side things. They are literally the vitamins, the social vitamins, the cognitive vitamins that grow the connections between the brain cells.
We've talked about so much and so many habits we can build, but building new habits can be really tough, right? And our community often asks how to bring these tools into their lives. So we've got a question from Ellen and Jonah Zimiles, who live in New Jersey and have a close family member who lives with Parkinson's.
We're in our 60s and know that diet and exercise is very important to people with Parkinson's and frankly, anybody who's aging. How can we start and build healthy habits for our family?
That's a great question. I think in anything in life, when you start or when you introduce a new theory or a new activity in your life, you have to find out where you are, first of all. So assessing where you are, who you are, what your likes are, what your dislikes are, how much you can do, and how much is too much. And so understanding who you are and what works best for you is the best place to start. As far as nutrition, to kind of make it more substantial, as far as nutrition is concerned, make it very, very easy and small things. And like we said earlier, the additive nature of things. So say, for example, don't get rid of anything, just add these. Add greens, add, say, for example, whole grains, and add some berries. Those are like very, very healthy foods that have a lot of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, and they're great for brain health as well. And then once that becomes a habit, then after a few weeks saying, okay, what are some of the unhealthy things that I am doing that I can slowly and gradually get rid of? Not do that right away. Do one small thing. So say, for example, if somebody is eating some candies. So I have a lot of community members who love sugar. And that's one of the most difficult things to get rid of, coming from a chocoholic myself and a sugar addict. And so you don't go cold turkey. You say, okay, I'm eating some jelly beans, and instead of eating a packet of jelly beans every other day, I'm going to cut it down to say, this much. So for example, I'm just going to cut it down to 50% of it. I'm going to eat half of it. And then 2 months go by and that becomes a habit. And then you cut down a little bit more. So it does take a very long time to introduce a habit, but it has to be done very, very slowly, incrementally, and it should be based on the person's likes and dislikes and their capacities.
We don't want to overhaul everything all at once, because that's not going to work long term.
Never. We're not dieting. We're not introducing, things into our life. We're changing habits. And
we're changing how we live.
We're changing how we live. We change our relationship with things that we eat on our plate. So, relationships take a very long time. And so we have to give ourselves time.
And there are some practical things that people can do as well. You talked about stacking, which is this idea of building in a new activity with something you always do. So maybe if you want to drink more water, you drink a glass of water before you have your morning coffee you have every day. Or you do your 5 squats before you brush your teeth, because hopefully you're brushing your teeth every day. Building these into your daily routines. Are there other things people can do practically when getting started or keeping going?
Yeah, we love the morning walk. The morning walk, morning sun is so important because of exercise, because of how it affects mood, how it starts the movement of behavior from the very beginning, especially with Parkinson's patients. This system is affecting both movement and motivation and things of that nature. So put your exercise shoes right next to your bed. So when you get up, that's the primer. That's what will move things. For food, have the greens chopped and ready on the weekend for the whole week, and have it in front of the fridge. And every time you open the fridge to eat anything else, your rule is you're going to have a serving of that green, whatever that is for you. And that's important. And as far as the other part of exercise is, if you're going to watch shows at night, pick one of the shows every night. And for that half an hour, you're standing and you're doing some exercise. That's incredible positive stacking. As far as mental activity is concerned, if there's nothing new that you want to pick up, let's say a course or a pottery or dancing or musical instrument, if there's a show that you're watching that's got some content, have a note paper and pen next to you. So that show every night, or a couple of shows every night, is going to be about learning. You're going to pay greater attention to that show to see how much of the details, and I mean details, not the main characters, but the side characters, you can remember after that show. Then that show becomes an exercise. You haven't done anything extra. You woke up from bed and there's the shoes. You opened the fridge and there's the greens. And then you were watching a show and you stood up and did squats and walked in place. And you were watching a show and afterwards you recalled more details. Those are powerful. Those are habit changes that actually then instigate other things. Imagine if you're doing those 4 things. Aren't you motivated to now take away some negatives? I did these things consistently. That's how behavior change takes place.
And as we bring these things into our life, how do we know whether it's working or we're making progress? How do we measure that benefit?
The most significant sign is just feeling energized. I mean, we have all felt it in a way. Say, for example, if you sleep well, the next morning you're happier, you're more energized, you actually call more people, at least I do. When I'm having a conversation, I'm faster. I make eye contact, I'm not irritable, and I come up with better ideas as well. When we exercise, that first few hours after a walk, that is such a powerful moment for people to be creative because you're energized, you feel good, your blood is actually flowing into the brain. And so those are the day-to-day changes that you feel, but reminding yourself that it's almost like putting money in a bank account. You're building a bank account for yourself, and that's cognitive resilience and cognitive reserve that's going to come in handy later on in life.
And beautifully stated. And one of the measurable ways to do this, short of going to clinicians where they do cognitive testing, is that list that you had next to you when you were watching the show and recalling. Look at that list from a month ago, from 2 months ago. You'll realize that your list is getting better and better. And that's a tangible, measurable way of doing things. And then for other shows that you weren't doing this for, see if you can actually get better at that. See how much you can recall. That's a very nice in-home cognitive test that you can see over time.
Loved ones and family members can be such a strong support for us in building these healthy habits. So let's hear from two community members, both of whom we met earlier, who have a similar question that's top of mind for anyone who cares for someone living with Parkinson's.
I'm wondering how I can best inspire and support Dave in starting and maintaining healthy habits.
How can we best support family members in their journeys?
This is an important question because when we're in the medical field, we are all about prescription and dictating and telling people and giving them lists and giving them directions. The first step is listening. The first step is understand how motivated they are. And if they are, that's their choice. And if they are, the next step is finding out where is the lowest hanging fruit where you and them can agree on to take the first step. It could be as simple, and don't do everything at once. Add greens, add the walk. Simple things help them make sure that they're successful in that behavior.
As we close, what is one thing you want people to walk away from this video with?
That they have the power to take care of this most beautiful organ ever. That is the brain. And I want them to think of the brain as themselves, as you would take care of a younger version of yourself. You're going to show it love and care and affection. You're going to be very patient. You're going to be very understanding, and you're not going to give up on them.
That's wonderful advice. I personally want you to walk away thanking yourself. You're here seeking information to help you best care for your brain and your full self. Wherever you are in your journey with brain health and lifestyle, that's a positive step forward. Thanks to our community members for sharing their questions, and thanks to our brain docs, Ayesha and Dean Sherzai, for sharing your insights and tips. Learn more about brain health and lifestyle at michaeljfox.org/askthemd.